Welcome to our latest episode here in the Ausdauerwelt podcast, Endurance World in English. And as sometimes we do it here, we also have English-speaking guests. And today I'm more than happy to welcome Nick Engerer. Hello, Nick.
Hey, good morning, John.
How's it going?
I've had a great morning. Got up, did a run. My partner came along with me. That was nice. She's doing a bit of running with me. And there's no better way to start the day than just get up and get out the door. It makes you feel fantastic. It helps you live longer too.
Yeah, that was nice, quick introduction to your topic as well. Live longer, longevity, biohacking. This is what comes up when we look in your Instagram account and your videos and everything. So ever since I've met you, um, and that was around Christmas or Boxing Day 2023, so maybe a bit more than a year, one year and a few months. I have learned a lot about you and what you do, and it has a lot to do, obviously, with health, longevity, triathlon. We share a lot of topics. I would say we go on a bike ride, so I disclosed this already. We sometimes go on a bike ride Saturday morning, swim in the beautiful Byron Bay on Sundays, and every now and then join awesome races here in the beautiful Northern Rivers region. So maybe apart from that, how would you introduce yourself? Like you are a fellow entrepreneur, you would have a um like a elevator pitch ready, I believe.
Always, John. Yeah, always ready to go for a variety of topics. Which is probably how I've weaseled my way onto your podcast. But I think it's a good fit because the way that I would say to this audience is that I'm I'm very much like the listeners here. I started off doing fitness because it makes me feel good. And I know that that's something that I can do to take care of myself and it challenges me. And what I think sets me apart from the listener, perhaps, although I invite them to join me, is that I see that by doing things like triathlon and eating well and sleeping well and leveraging a few of the amazing new technologies that are out there to help us live longer, I call them longevity technologies, that with just a little bit of a mental shift and understanding, I actually know that by doing the right things, I can live 5 to 10 years longer in health. That I don't have to get the diseases of aging as I grow older, which are what we see very prevalent in our modern society. This is things like having a stroke, heart attack, cancer, Alzheimer's disease. Those diseases are not destiny. And by taking care of ourselves, we can stay healthy for the entirety of our life and strong and independent for the entirety of our life. And those of us who have gone along to some age group races will readily be able to cite some people that we know who are in their 70s and 80s who are doing some pretty incredible things. And the main thing that they have, the main thing that sets them apart is they've got a longevity mindset. They know, you know what, I'm going to keep going, even though it's getting harder and harder, because as long as I keep going, I'll stick around. I'll be here and I'll be the healthiest version of myself I can. So that's what I encourage people to do. I encourage people to adopt what I call a longevity mindset. And so I call myself a longevity mindset strategist. And we whack the word biohacker on there afterwards because it's fun.
Mhm. Wow. You packed that already pretty pretty well with a lot of interesting aspects. Maybe one of the first ones I wanna dive more into is actually, yeah, the term longevity. Um, I think I I didn't learn more about this topic before I've come across Rich Roll's book about finding ultra or something, and then Peter Attia, I think he wrote something like Outlive or something like that, and this was given to my wife a couple of years ago, I guess, and we are both kind of turning 40 or in the 40s. I'm a bit older than you, but it's kind of a turning point, so to say, for many males. Like what I saw in the past years is really, yeah, if I don't take care of my body and my strength, my fitness, my health, then it goes down the river very quickly. And maybe it's the time in our lives, like the males' lives, that you should really take care of that. Otherwise, yeah, you will be leading or not leading a life that is a lot unhealthier, right? And I don't even know the German translation for longevity. Like it's probably more of a Anglo-Saxon phenomenon, I would say. Would you agree that this technology and all the science behind it is more kind of driven by US and maybe Australian English-speaking countries?
I can understand that the technology side of it would be, and certainly the hype is
Yeah.
led by the US. But there's a lot of really solid science out of Europe on the
Yeah.
concept of human longevity. And many of the tech companies that are working in this space, that are innovating in this space, are based in Europe. And one of my good colleagues here in Australia, who actually organized a longevity panel that I spoke at in October last year, and actually met a company that I decided to invest in this
Hmm.
space from that meeting. She's German,
Oh,
so
interesting.
yeah, I wouldn't write the Germans off. I think that it really is just the distribution of people in society. There's those of us who have a growth oriented mindset, who are excited about the future. They tend to be the ones that start to see what's happening with the possibilities surrounding human health span and human lifespan that lie before us. And that's how I would define longevity. Longevity is referring to the concept of health span, so the number of healthy years that you can live without disease free health span. And then lifespan, which would be ultimately how many years you live cumulatively. And something
Hmm.
really interesting has happened in the space of longevity with respect to these two terms, in that one, we've learned that we know what will give us more health span. Like I mentioned, that magic number 5 to 10 more years. I can already give you 5 to 10 more healthy years in your life with just some basic changes and the right mindset. As long as you can stick to that over the course of your life, you can already have that. And there's certainly a lot of promise in extending human lifespan, meaning the maximal number of years that we can live. Now, there was a famous French woman who lived to be 122. That's currently the upper maximum limit. However, she didn't have any of the technologies or knowledge about health that we do now. And we are learning very quickly that it's much more important how you live your life, the lifestyle factors, in determining how your genes are expressed, rather than just saying, like, oh, this French woman who lived to 122 had great genes. It's not true. There's actually Near Barzilai, a famous researcher in the longevity space, went and looked for longevity genes, convinced he would find them, and he wrote a whole book to basically say they kind of don't exist. And that's because we've learned that it's actually your epigenome, the expression of your DNA, that is the most powerful factor in controlling your health span. And fitness is one of the most important things you can do for that, which is why it's great to speak to your audience, because they're already doing that. So,
Hmm.
longevity, health span, and lifespan is those two concepts wrapped up together. And the hype part is that many of us, myself included, think that the upper limit for human lifespan is much higher right now than we think. We tend to assume that it is. And the more technology that comes along, the greater the promise of that being extended. And so, in a sense, we might be on the cusp of one of the most important economic transitions of our life, of the human race, is our history, in that we might start to be able to buy time. That's a pretty provocative idea. But as an entrepreneur, you could see just how valuable that commodity would be.
Hmm. Well, thanks so much for this definition, and it makes much more sense, right? Like having this combination of health span and lifespan. And I think this is why I'm struggling a little bit in the German language, because I don't think it breaks down or breaks up that way. So some equivalents would be health, like Gesundheit, and Lebensdauer, like yeah, lifespan. But one word that kind of combines it both or all is something I need to maybe come up with or research better. But I do agree. There's of course also pretty good research in the German-speaking countries, like not only Germany, Austria, Switzerland as well. Um, and of course, the um, the fields that are related to this are not only medicine but also biology, chemistry, and stuff like that. And that's certainly also something we do a lot of in Germany. And yeah, so I like the idea of ex extending your lifetime, but also do it in a healthier way because what does it help you, to just have more years on this planet and but you can't do anything. So that I think this is a very important aspect. It's just not about getting older. It's really about having that vitality and ability to do fun stuff, right? You want to have both of that. So that's why it makes sense to combine those different aspects. And yeah, when you were talking about those, um, I was there was one image jumping into my mind that I've seen like 10 years ago. And it was basically I think it was like was it an X-ray? I don't know what kind of imaging
An
model it
MRI
was.
scan,
Yes, yes,
MRI scan, they showed slices of
exactly.
the femur and the quadriceps and hamstrings of a
Yes,
sedentary, I believe it was 70-year-old versus a
yeah,
triathlete. Yes.
yes, and
Yes. And what did
yeah,
we notice? What did we notice that image? We noticed that the 70-year-old triathlete, I believe that's the right age, had plenty of lean muscle mass. They had very little fat deposits in the tissues in their muscles. And in fact, there's been remarks, I believe, in that paper that they looked very much more like somebody decades younger. And
yeah,
that's the really powerful thing that we get from longevity fitness. And in particular, triathlon fits really well into that, is that the people who are training, if they keep training, they can keep training. Now there's pressures on you. When you aging is a process of things becoming a little less disorganized, a little more chaotic. And you're inevitably not going to be able to do in the last 2 decades of your life what you could do in the first 3 decades of your life. That we haven't any ability to change that at this stage. And there likely will always be some sort of relationship between aging and decreasing performance, no matter how far we push these concepts of health span and lifespan. But we already know that someone who has that mindset, that longevity mindset of if I keep training, I can keep training. I say you keep what you train. I also say that when you train, it helps you stick around, right? You're not going to die. And the person who that was compared to, the slice that they looked at from somebody who is sedentary, had exceptionally atrophied muscles, so shrinking muscles. In aging, we call this effect sarcopenia. That's the medical term for it. And they had lots of fatty deposits where their muscle used to be. And the reason that this happens is that as the body's getting older, it's coming under increasing pressure. So it's not going to keep maintaining systems that you're not using. And also, full stop, regardless of aging, if you don't use your muscles, your body won't maintain them. Even at a ripe young age of 39, where I'm at, if I don't keep strength training and I don't keep doing my triathlon training, my body will adapt to say, look, I don't need to be doing that expensive work anymore. So you always have to be training. You always have to tell your body what is important. You have to be giving it that information. And it actually goes back to a word I mentioned before, which is your epigenome. It's the part of your DNA that's dynamic, that's controlling how your DNA is expressed. It's like a layer on top of your DNA. It's a signal, it's information. And when you're training, you're telling that epigenome, yeah, keep building muscle, keep lean, keep lean mass on the body. Don't deposit lots of fat. let's keep having lots of cell turnover so we keep things healthy and fresh. That's the signals that you're giving your body when you're training. And we can see dramatic differences in people who are in the later decades of their life when they keep training versus those who have not. And that image is a fantastic one. And it'd be a great one to share with the audience if you have any way to do so.
Absolutely, I'm gonna research that. I just hope it's not fake, it's not a hoax or anything. But
It
since
is
you were,
not. It is in a paper.
yeah,
I've looked at the paper. Yeah.
yeah, I think it was probably on Instagram or even Pinterest or something. It came up several times. I've seen that several times, and I also believe it's going back to a study actually. But what was really frightening was to see that image of that person who didn't do sports. And you were saying that the other one had lean muscle. I mean, there was so much muscle cells. Like it was mind-blowing to see the comparison. And not only did the other person not have any muscles left, there was also just barely any bones left. And this is so frightening. And I was thinking, I was literally telling to my wife, I want to be that guy in the 70s or even 80s who's able to do some sports. And that kind of was, I was kind of reminded of that again when I did Ironman Western Australia when was that, last year or the year before, when the oldest male finisher was uh was finishing the race in 14 something hours at the age of 84. Imagine
What
that.
an example. What an example. That's
This is,
very impressive.
I mean, most people on this planet, no matter their age, right? They are not even able to finish an Ironman at all. And this guy, he's 84 years of age, and he's just finishing it in about 14 hours, right? It's just mind blowing. And that's the
That's a
mindset,
great
right?
example.
This
It
is
is
a
the mindset.
person who has been training for his whole life, right? For 80 plus years. And this is what it takes, obviously.
Yeah. So it's mindset that keeps you doing that. And in fact, when I refer to this concept of longevity, I say often, and I think it's important to say, I say longevity is not a destination. Longevity is not something you have or you get or you can really keep or hold on to. It is a mindset. It is a mindset. It's something you have to be living each and every day. And this gentleman you're referring to, whether or not he would use that language, he is exhibiting the characteristics of a longevity mindset, and that he knows that if he keeps going, he keeps training, he can keep going, keep training. And it's going to be hard when you're in your 80s to wake up each day and do that level, that volume of training. That's not
Yeah.
easy, but he's got something in him that is making him keep going. And as long as he does that, he'll keep going. He's not going to live forever. I'm not here to tell you that. I'm not here to make up stories about how we're not going to die. I don't think that's what longevity is either. Although there are some in our community who take that narrative and run with it. He is doing something where he's maximally living his life, I would say. It's a very rich thing for him to do. And what would really make his day is somebody like you, when you see, and I think I'd like to say this to our audience, when you see some of these ladies and gentlemen who are doing triathlons in their 70s and 80s, and you see them up on the podium, they might be the only person up there. But I'll tell you what, they earned that medal around their neck. Go shake their hand. I love doing that. Go shake their hand, just say, well done. And you know what they love to hear? I'll see you next year.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention is that when you want to be fit in your later years, you need to train much more. This is the other thing, right? It's not that you train less, you have to actually take more care, and this shows you what kind of commitment has to go into that, and also what kind of luxury it is, right? It is not the case for everybody, that everybody has enough time and resources to do that. It's sad enough to say, right? We can say we are fortunate enough and enjoy that freedom and luxury to be able to do that, to have enough time and disposable income, so to say, to do all that. And I wish that more people could do that, because it makes such a big difference, right? When you can do sports, when you join those events, feel the energy, live a healthy life, and be strong in a holistic way. It's not just about it's not about your fitness only. It's also your mental, your psychology, your mental aspect, and mental stability. I mean, there's so many topics that are related to this, right? We were focusing more on the body now. We were focusing more on the body cells and stuff like that. But there's so much more to it, and let's maybe, yeah, stick with the body aspect. Like, would you say that triathlon is necessary? It's not necessarily the best sport, right? To keep yourself intact, or would you say it's still a very good combination? Um, I'm just talking also about the injuries, or thinking of injuries. Like, it's a fine line sometimes, especially when you belong to the age groupers that are maybe a little bit more competitive, right? Who just don't wanna who don't wanna just finish, who also wanna get better and maybe get on the podium eventually. Maybe we can go a little bit into that.
Yeah, this is butting up upon the topic of how much is too much
Yeah.
for exercise. And one is one way to look at the answering this question. And in general, we find that the benefits you get from adding more exercise are you pretty much can add more and more exercise and always get more benefit. There are some cases where you're hurting yourself, and we have to know about our recovery. We have to take care of our joints. We have to pay attention if we're developing any heart fluttering or arrhythmia. Like if you're experiencing that, don't mess around with that. Go talk to your doctor, get a stress test done, make sure you're not headed for some electrical challenges in your heart, because pushing yourself on your bike, your heart never evolved to be a bike engine, right? But you've made it into one, and some of us have gotten quite good at that. You're an incredible cyclist, John. You
Oh,
can
thanks.
you
Too
can
much
keep
said.
going. You've trained that heart. It's a strong bike engine. But there is such thing as too much, and we have to be tuning into that. And no one really can tell you what that number is for you. But if you're not recovering well and you're accumulating injuries and you're getting sick, you're getting viral infections, that's a good sign that you're doing too much. But those things aside, generally, more exercise is always better. Now, the first 20 to 40% of the exercise you've added into your life, that gives you the most benefit. And this is why triathlon is such a good sport. I think that triathletes are longevity athletes because they're doing a sport that is working both the upper and lower body. It's training the zone two aerobic zones. It's training those higher zones, VO2 max type training. So you're getting this variety of training in terms of your cardiovascular system. It requires a lot of great brain activity to be able to use both your arms and your legs and to transition through different activities. And it requires a certain level of competency when it comes to nutrition. You have to eat well if you want to do well in triathlon. Yeah, you can get away with eating lollies, eating candies, eating highly refined foods. But in general, you're going to be metabolically healthy, even if you're doing those things. You're very unlikely to develop type 2 diabetes if you're an avid triathlete, because you're training and you're using up your glycogen stores, you're using up your blood glucose, you're increasing your insulin sensitivity. You're generally very metabolically healthy. So you're aerobically healthy, you're anaerobically trained, you're metabolically healthy, you're challenging yourself in your nervous system. You're making sure you don't overtrain because you'll collapse and not be able to keep going. And you're doing something else really important. You're generally doing this with other people who love doing it. And that means you're getting social interactions, you're improving your mental health. It's often a great outlet for stress. It's often something we can do with other people, that we get that social connection afterwards. You mentioned swimming and Byron. Well, what do we do after, what do we do before we swim? We often go for a run, have a chat, and then go for a swim, and then have coffee and sit in the grass and hang out and connect and talk about our week and what's happening in our life. So it's a social activity as well. And well, there's another part in there where you invest a lot of money in all your equipment, so you want to keep doing it so you don't waste it. Yeah. So you got a bit of impetus to keep going. So it's got a lot of things going for it. Is it the only thing you need to do to be a well-rounded longevity athlete? No, you got to do some strength training, right?
Mm.
You got to do some strength training. I was getting my bike fit by a guy who's he's openly, it talks about how he's quite autistic and he just says whatever he thinks, and I really like that about him. He's tremendous mathematical brain for analyzing positions on the bike. And he got to my back and he was poking at the muscles in my back, and he's like, triathletes don't have these muscles. Are you going to the gym too? you know, and so we have to do strength training to be a well-rounded longevity athlete, and be thinking a bit about our balance and how springy we are, and can we still do some of those explosive movements that triathlon doesn't necessarily make us do. But it sure gets us a long way toward being a very well-rounded fit person, and that's part of the reason that I've chosen triathlon as a sport to do for a long
Mm.
time in my life, with that longevity mindset.
Wow, I was never thinking about all different phases that triathlon has, but you showed them to us, and I might be a good cyclist, but you definitely better versed in terms of strength training. Sometimes I look at your videos and I think to myself, well, I was never able to do that. I should get some coaching by you and learn how to balance on that ball and whatnot, and do this and that. I think it's really important. The strength training aspect, I wanna just stress that once more. It really changed a lot in my life as a triathlete, as a hobby triathlete. I think when you are in your 20s or 30s, it's maybe not yet that important, but the older you get, the more time you should dedicate to your strength training. And if you don't, then you see the injuries coming, especially when you train a lot of running and cycling. Maybe not so much as swimming, but cycling and especially running has a much bigger impact on your bones and tendons and whatnot. And if you don't balance that out, then you will see the injuries coming. And this is, I think, most of the times what people see, what they experience, and then they stop with their sports. How many triathletes do we know that have done a couple of races and then they get injured and stop entirely, and maybe keep on eating a lot but not moving anymore, and that's the best start to, grow wider.
You've
And
described the rookie year of many triathletes, the only year of many triathletes. I've seen that time and time again. People often come into the sport and accumulate injuries, and it's because it takes our body quite a long time to adapt
Mm,
to new activity. And in fact, this is a really important concept in biology and in evolutionary biology. The thinking around what one of the most primary factors of what the aging process is a decreased ability to adapt. And this is how evolutionary biology thinks of aging, that we are losing our ability to adapt to the environment because when we're young, even when we're in utero, we're highly adaptable because we have to come out very vulnerable into an environment that could be quickly changing. And so we need to be able to have an abundance of food and then a scarcity of food, or really hot temperatures and then really cold temperatures, and be able to be okay in that. So we have a lot of adaptability when we're youthful. And as we grow older, that adaptability is less important, because ultimately, in terms of biology, we need to be adaptable, be modifying that epigenome according to the environment, and then be of age to reproduce and create offspring. And then we've fulfilled our biological purpose. And afterwards, we're more or less no longer important. So we don't, evolution never solved the problem of, well, what happens when we get older and these things start breaking down and we're losing our adaptability, because it doesn't really care. But what we can do with that is we can think when, as I'm growing older, I need longer to adapt to new training. I need longer to adapt to new activities. And so many people come into triathlon in their 30s or 40s and they come to it just like they did maybe in their 20s when they wanted to just go play a game of pickup football or soccer, and they could just jump in and do basketball or whatever other sport and be okay. Maybe they're a bit sore, but they can adapt. When you're doing that later in life, you need to give yourself a longer timeline for your body to adapt. It still can, it still will. And your body can even remember training you did when you're much younger, and it can come back easier for some than others. But this adaptation piece is really important. It's part of what you're describing when we say many people try to come into this sport and are injured. It's because they're pushing their bodies too quickly. And in particular, with activities like running, there is a very important adage or truth, understood truth in the running world of don't add more than 10% volume per week, unless you've got a really deep running background, then you can go faster. But if you're relatively new, don't add more than 10% running volume per week, week on week. And give yourself a deload week in there where you take a break, reduce the load for a week, maybe every 8 weeks, because you're asking your body to adapt too fast and you'll get injured. So I think this is an important way of thinking about aging in terms of that reduced adaptability that may be useful to our audience, just to think, I am a bit older than I used to be. I just give myself a bit longer, be a little easier on myself, because this is a long game we're talking about when it comes to training for endurance sports. And when it comes to having a longevity mindset, we're trying to do the right thing so it's sustainable over time, not just trying to hurry to get an outcome in a 12-week training peaks plan.
Absolutely right. And it's like I think I got myself into triathlon maybe almost 15 years ago, and it still feels like I'm learning so much almost every day, right? It's beautiful in one way, but it can be also a little bit like, oh my goodness, when you are an impatient person and you see how much time and work it needs to go into something like finishing that race. I'm not even talking about the long distances, right? Like half or full distance. Even an Olympic distance, it is a big achievement. And I should, I mean, of course, also doing a sprint triathlon, but let's say an average fit person should be able to finish that, right? But to finish something longer than that requires a dedicated amount of time, definitely. And the longer you go, the more time needs to go into it. And I would say if you wanna do longer races like half Ironman and stuff like that, you should really train at least for 2, 3 years before you tackle that in a sustainable way. Of course, you can do the checkbox thing and say, oh, I'm gonna go from zero to hero in 1 year and finish an Ironman. But again, most people that I saw doing this didn't stick around for long in that sport. And it's perfectly valid, right? Who am I to judge that? But for example, for me personally, it was never a thing of do it once in a lifetime and get out of the sport. The reason why I embraced that sport so much is because it is so manifold. It has so many different beautiful aspects and sides, and we didn't talk about the travel aspect yet, but all the things that we were just covering and talking about are beautiful and enrich your life. And this is basically why we are also running that podcast, right? We have I told you about it just before the recording started. We have started about 7 years ago with this podcast and have like 500,000 downloads already. And so many people who find us and write us messages about, hey, you inspired us to get into the sport, and we developed ourselves by listening to your show and stuff like that. And this is really amazing, right? Because the sport, the triathlon sport, and also the other related sports are really helping you to lead a better life, to not only live longer but healthier. And I think that's a very important thing. Now, my question is, how did you get into triathlon? Were you like, hmm, what kind of sport should I do that combines all that, or was it more by chance? I'm curious to learn how you ended up being a fellow triathlon team member of mine.
It's a fun story because I got very curious about this whole longevity technology revolution, I'll call it, because it is going to be that, and it's well underway. When I had emerged from a really challenging period of time in my life, when my son was born, his mother was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, had to have a really big surgery, um, some chemotherapy. A few years went by, it came back. She had to do that again. And today she's well and in remission. And we're very fortunate and grateful that my son has his mother in the world because of medical technology. But as I emerged from that challenging period of my life, it really changed my thinking to the point of thinking, well, why do we have this world full of amazing technologies, but we still have late disease diagnoses? Why do we, even the rich and the famous, it doesn't spare anyone. All of a sudden, somebody you've heard about, they're known for a long period of time, has a stage 4 cancer and they die. This is a late stage disease diagnosis challenge in our world, and I know this has touched both me and you personally, right? We know this story, and that is a travesty in our world. And I got into looking into, well, why don't we have ability to detect disease when it's treatable a year earlier, 2 years earlier, when the tumor is smaller, or when the heart attack based plaque that caused the cardiovascular event. Why didn't we detect that earlier? Well, in fact, we have the technologies to do that, and we've had them for some time. They're just simply not deployed at scale. And so this got me thinking, well, how can I explore these technologies, profile them, and help others become aware of it? And so I decided I was going to go to a premier longevity clinic in San Diego called the Health Nucleus. It's run by a company called Human Longevity Inc. I think they've changed the name of the actual clinic, but Human Longevity Inc. And I did a full body MRI, full battery of blood testing, EKG, balance testing, full workup of bloods, full genome sequencing, the works, did it all. And I was 32 at the time. And I come out to the other side of that and do my post appointment with the doctor there. And she says, Nick, everything's looking pretty good. We'd like to see you back off on the saturated fats. We don't think this, I was doing a ketogenic diet at the time. We don't think this ketogenic diet's very good for your long-term risk. And maybe you'll change that. But everything else looks really good. There's no concerns. Look very healthy. But I do think you'd benefit from doing more cardiovascular exercise, more heart pumping exercise. And I rolled my eyes. I was like, oh, not this again. I'm gonna have to get back on the bike at the gym, go to the pump class. Like, I had never connected with a good cardiovascular aerobic fitness routine. I'd not connected with one in some time. I'd always liked being in the gym. I liked lifting weights, but I didn't really connect with anything when I was in my mid 20s in terms of what activity I would do that would give me that cardiovascular fitness. And so I had to I went to this clinic. I dropped a few $1,000s to learn what I had to do for my longevity, and this was it. So I was going to take that seriously. And I came back and I kind of stumbled around and couldn't find anything I really connected with. But what I could connect with is I enjoyed hiking. And so I started going on hikes. And then I realized, okay, I'm going to hike a little faster. And then all of a sudden I was running a little bit. And then I realized I like doing running on trails. I'd never tried that before. And I fell in love with trail running. And I started trail running. And I started building up my volume, running like 30 kilometers a week over a couple of different runs on the trails. Really enjoyed that. And I thought, well, that's really good. That's really good for me. But, I'm only kind of working my lower body. What about my upper body? And I thought, I used to like swimming when I was younger. I'll just go for a swim or two. Just go for a swim once a week, see how that feels, and get back in the pool. You know how it is when you haven't swam in a long time and you get in the pool and you're sputtering and you go 100 meters and you think you're gassed and you can't keep going. To take 3 minutes before you do the next one. But over time, that started to feel good. And I started to enjoy it. And one day in my mid 30s, when I was running on the trail, I thought, I kind of do like bike riding. Maybe I'll do a triathlon. And I had this moment of like flashed inspiration where I was like, that sounds awesome. I don't even know why I thought of it. It's like, I wonder if there's one coming up. Sure enough, the Byron Bay Triathlon was just a few months away. And I did what nobody should do. And I immediately went and bought my first bike and made it a TT bike and clipped in and fell over and bloodied my knees time and time again. And was scared absolutely out of my mind getting on those TT bars, like wobbling around. But I made it happen. And I did that race in Byron. And anybody who's swam in the Byron Bay for that triathlon knows that you're often swimming through swell. There's
Mm,
2.5 meter waves that day, and a bit of a current coming across, and it was really hard at the beginning of that race. Getting around the first buoy, I felt like, oh, I don't know if I can keep going. And I
mm,
had this moment of thinking, like, but I've got all these people cheering for me today. I've got to finish this swim. I got to get out there on the bike. And as soon as I got through the swim and pushed myself, I got on the bike and I saw all the people around me just doing their best. And I just, again, I felt inspired. And I had a beautiful experience. After which I saw this Byron Bay Triathlon Club sitting there having a great time cheering on the people on the podium. I thought, oh, there's a group here that could do that. And so I joined that group. And then it just got better from there. And it just sucked me right in because it gave me so much. It gave me a reason to be doing all that training. It balanced me. It challenged me. It gave me people to connect with on it. And it was so fun. I just really enjoyed doing it. And that is what sucked me into triathlon. I think I'm in my maybe fourth year of training, and I don't even actually train that hard. I only do sprint triathlons. I'm not doing Olympics. I'm not doing Ironmans, half Ironmans, just because I simply don't have the time,
mm,
with kids and running businesses, but also because that's already enough
mm,
from the longevity perspective. Just doing that much and some strength training, that's enough. That you don't actually get that much more longevity benefit to go harder than that. You do get the benefit of pushing yourself and achieving things that I do resonate with. And if I had some more space in my life, I might decide to go a bit longer distance. But it's given me all those things, and that's why it's really stuck with me.
mm. My advice is don't go long because you might get addicted. And then all the benefits that you see can become a little bit of a burden, let's say. No, just kidding.
Good advice, John. No, I could see the challenge there. Like once you start doing the longer stuff, the shorter races might not feel as satisfying. But what I do like about racing shorter is it is encouraging me to try to push harder and train more that higher heart rate zone work. That I think is important to try to get into this concept of your VO2 max, which is your maximal use and uptake of oxygen. That is a really important marker in longevity in terms
Mm,
of your overall risk, how likely you are to die in any given year. And in my opinion, the sweet spot around that kind of spread to Olympic distance training, it's still working some of those higher anaerobic zones in your training for your VO2 max. Whereas when you go toward longer, you're really trying to build your aerobic base as big as possible. That'll still have benefits on your VO2 max, although not quite as it won't take it quite as high. And I'm very interested in that number, a high VO2 max, because one of the things we see, one of the signals we see in aging is that there's a couple, but one is that your VO2 max, it can peak around, it depends on the person, but it'll peak somewhere in your late 30s usually. And then it starts to decline. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Many of them are physiological, some of them are neurological. And that marker, the kind of peak you get, your decline from there is where you end up later in life. So the higher you get that peak and you have that slow decline, maintaining it as best you can throughout your life, the better positioned you are in those later decades, the extreme end of your lifespan, of your health span, to stay healthy. And in fact, we know that if you look at the distribution of VO2 maxes, if you're in the bottom percentiles, the bottom 20th percentile of VO2 max for any given age versus the top 20th percentile of VO2 max, which most people listening to this probably are in that top, you actually are 4 times less likely to die in any given year after the
mm,
age 50, about the age 50, just from having that level of VO2 max. That's how much benefit it confers you in terms of longevity. So it's a very important number. And it's one I wanted to mention today. And it's one of the reasons I like going shorter and more intense with my racing.
It perfectly makes sense. The funny thing is, um, I discover all that VO2 max training only now. Like I started maybe 2, 3 years ago to really dedicate more time to training my VO2 max and all those thresholds. And I think I never had a better VO2 max value, to be honest. I wasn't measuring it really like 10 years ago, but I'm pretty sure that it's much better now because I'm also training much more intense. At least, looking at my training hours, like maybe I train a good amount of 10, 12, 15 hours, depending on the season. But let's say 1 or 2 hours are dedicated per week to interval training, and I see the benefits definitely. And I just hope it's not too late yet, to even build more on that. But I'm pretty sure it makes sense. And actually, what I wanted to say is also that even for the half and full distance events, you should really train your VO2 max and FTP threshold and so on. It's very important to know about those concepts and not just go on your bike for 5, 6 hours and be in that recovery slash zone two area, but mix it up a little bit. Yeah. Of course, the long bike ride is very important when you go longer distances, but I would say if you have some time, implement at least 1 or 2 sessions per week. Run, one bike session. I see your Wahoo kicker in the background as well. Let's talk about that too. Maybe about how to how to use those different techniques and training methods to get there. Apart from, of course, doing, let's say, VO2 max intervals on the bike, what would you say can we do as a triathlete uh, on top of that in order to improve our overall fitness and maybe have um, even something like better lactate levels?
Yeah, I think the complication in that question is that it's very athlete specific, and it depends on your level of fitness. It depends on your current training experiences, and your resources that you have. And ultimately, I think this is something we should be working with a coach on, but not everybody's going to make that investment. So
Mm,
we can still talk about the basics here. And you've mentioned a few important terms in there. And the one that you mentioned was zone two, right? So zone two training, we're talking about being in that aerobically comfortable zone, conversational pace. Perceived effort is somewhere along a 5 or a 6, maybe even a bit lower at 4.
yeah.
It's based on volume. It's something we can maintain for a long period of time that still allows us to get to fatigue in our muscles and our skeletal muscle and in our neurological connections to our skeletal muscle, which are equally as important. But aerobically, cardiovascularly, we're not experiencing the same amount of fatigue. And it's building what we call that aerobic base when we're doing this zone two training. And general rule of thumb, you're going to want to be having something along the lines of 70, 80% of your training is in zone two. And it depends if it's 70 or it's 80, it depends on how hard you push zone two. If you're kind of at the upper end of that, pushing yourself borderline zone three, it's you probably want to do a little bit less. But if you really can't be conservative with it, you can have a big chunk of your training be in that zone two. And it's this idea of building aerobic base. And you're going to want to do most of that on the bike, although you do want to have that at least one longer run a week
Mm,
for building that aerobic base. And the same thing with the swim. And when you start talking about swimming, you're also talking about recovery too. So rides are nice for recovery, swims are nice for recovery, and that's going to be even easier than that zone two pacing. It's not going to really be heart pumping like you would get in zone two. We're talking about something that feels easy, is gentle. And importantly, I think with recovery, it's more about getting movement in your body, getting your blood flow, opening up, dilating all your capillaries, flushing out toxins, bringing in new fresh blood, stimulating growth factors, all those beautiful things that exercise does for you without the nervous system stress. And I think that gets under discussed. And
Hmm.
the reason the nervous system stress is so important is that, and in fact, if we go read some of the great books of Tim Noakes, for example, one of the great authors, South African guy, um, dropping the name of his book off the top of my head. I should have looked at that before I came in here, but they've done the research on this to understand that the limiter for our exercise training, particularly at the extreme upper levels, is the brain. The thing that will make you stop before anything else is the brain. And there's all sorts of really interesting tricks we can do to show that this is true. My favorite of which is putting some water, carbohydrate infused water in your mouth while you're training and then spitting it out, because you can trick your brain into going further by doing that, because your brain thinks
Interesting.
it's getting hydration and nutrition, so it can go a little bit further. Another important one is heat adaptation. Your
Hmm.
brain doesn't want to get overheated, but the more you train in the heat, one of the biggest adaptations happening in there is your brain feeling safe that, okay, it's going to be okay. I can keep training in this more extreme condition. So again, it's this neurological connection that's really important in our nervous system, particularly in our emotional nervous, like the part of our nervous system that's governed emotionally. We shouldn't be ignoring that. Like that's where recovery is so important. It's easy in your nervous system while still giving you some of the benefits. It's telling your body that the activity is safe. It doesn't always have to be stressful. And so your brain's not making that association between too much stress and the activity. And it's also hopefully getting your nervous system relaxed a little bit. And I had to learn this the hard way because I can push, 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 push. But the thing that will knock me off the training ladder is getting sick because I've kept pushing when I'm emotionally stressed.
Mm.
Right. So I've have emotionally stressful things that I've dealt with. I've dealt with a divorce and lawyers and property settlement. I had to be gentle to myself some weeks during that. I've gone through some emotional challenges in my relationship. When those come up, I got to be gentle on myself. If I've got a lot of work stress, a lot of life things happening, I got to be a little bit easier on myself, because that emotional stress is a part of that nervous system stress. And so we have to be thinking about that. It's multifactorial. And if you're feeling resilient and you're not emotionally stressed and you're recovering well, that's when you can start playing around with this zone 5 training, that
Mm.
VO2 max training, all the way at the peak, shorter amounts of really intense work. And you got to pick what you like to do, honestly. Like, I don't like doing that in the pool so much. It makes me dizzy and want to throw up, but I
Mm.
will run up a hill real fast. So I know I can do that. And I don't mind doing some harder efforts on the bike, on a TT bike, on a beautiful flat road, like really push it and just get that burn going, get your heart rate up. And you got to know where you can get into that upper level of heart rate zone in a way that you're willing to keep doing it consistently, and you're doing that from a place where you're recovering well. And if you're not, if you're emotionally stressed, you've got something bothering you, like a sniffle, a little virus in your house, or that's been an intense period of time for any other reason, it might be a good one to skip, because it's really about nervous system tolerance, and you can push yourself beyond where your body's willing to recover, and that'll set you back.
Mm. Yeah, I like what you explained around this nervous system, and yeah, like I was I was also thinking about specific training sessions that I like. I I'm like you. I don't like to, vomit in the pool, so to say. I really can't push myself too much in the pool anymore. I used to be able to do that more, but yeah, given the fact that you don't necessarily win a race in the water, like in the first discipline, you might well lose if you were, especially in the shorter distances, when you don't keep up with the fast ones, then you won't win the race. But um, the thing is, I do like the bike trainer. I was mentioning it before. I'm also training um, on a smart trainer, and it's just awesome how you can structure your training and be very efficient and effective with your training, especially when it comes to VO2 max. And what I also personally like very much is the sweet spot training, which is a little bit in between. I don't even know how that works in terms of biologics. but that's certainly a good one too. And then of
The
course
lactate threshold,
yeah,
pushing a little bit anaerobic, so you start
yeah,
learning how
yeah,
to shunt the lactate pyruvate. Yeah, yep, yep.
exactly, and really move your FTP a little bit up, and that's a very very good session for sure. And the interval runs, like for me, what really worked well was like a set of 8 to 10 times 800 fast, like faster than half marathon pace. That this was a session that really boosted my marathon in an Ironman. So, but yeah, that's again very specific for long distance. I'm not sure if that's necessarily working for the sprint or Olympic distance preparation. But this is what I personally liked most in terms of interval training. I know that any sort of sprint or like 200, 400 meter interval sessions will have some sort of benefit when you implement it in your schedule somehow.
That's the stuff I like. I like running fast for that 400, 200.
Yeah,
And have to often be told to slow down by my coach. Like, no, Nick, just like a little slower because I love those ones so much.
yeah, I saw you running on the track, man. I can't keep up. So good on you that you have that fitness, that explosive fitness. This is really
Yeah,
something.
but I can't do that 3 hours on the bike like you can. So it's different types of mental toughness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, as you said, everybody is different. And that's also beautiful, right? You gotta listen and know your body in order to adjust your training and get the best out of it. And I think that's really something you shouldn't compare yourself to another athlete. You should really try to see how can you evolve and develop as an athlete and become a better version of yourself. Yeah, we have covered already so many interesting things. What we haven't really talked about is diet and nutrition, really. And when you were mentioning the ketogenic diet, I was also thinking back to my experiments with that, and I made so many mistakes in this context. Let's don't dive deeper into ketogenic diet. Let's just maybe stick again with the basics. What would you say helps you to have a longer and healthier life? And maybe a second idea here, maybe we can connect that with the blue zones, right? When we talk about longevity, the studies and research on the so-called blue zones where people tend to live longer and healthier and whatnot is pretty interesting. And I think one very important aspect of that is nutrition.
Yeah, and I like to refer to it as nutrition and not speak of it in terms of diets,
Yeah.
because really the goal here is to optimally fuel yourself to provide your body with the nutrition it requires. And I think at the outset, the first thing I would say is that as athletes, we have greater demands for nutrition, particularly replacement of everything we're using up. And it does make the quality of our nutrition more important. Many who are maybe just going to the gym or just doing some lifting or just doing some running, who aren't really training for triathlons, can get away with a bit more loose decision making in terms of their nutrition. But particularly for triathletes, and when we get into serious endurance level events like half Ironmans and Ironmans, not that I have personal experience with those, but I understand the biochemistry of what's happening and the nutrition of what's happening very well. We need to be paying attention to, in particular, what our tendencies are in terms of deficiencies. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to work out without doing some blood testing. And I think that that's really valuable if you're serious about improving your nutrition in as a longevity athlete, as a triathlete, that you are checking your blood work from time to time. In fact, I think this is so valuable that I've actually invested in a company called Prescient here in Australia, who are making it possible to order your own blood tests. So you don't have to go to the doctor, just order your own. You got to invest some of that disposable income into it, but it might be something you only do once or twice a year, and it can help you be aware of deficiencies that you might be developing. I can give you a personal example. If I wasn't tracking my own blood work, I wouldn't have understood that the fatigue I was feeling toward the end of last year was my hemoglobin being dropping lower. And why was that? Well, my iron levels were okay, but my transferrin levels were low, and that's the stores of my iron. And I brought in an iron supplement, a high quality iron supplement, in response to that, and I have felt my performance tick back up, my recovery tick back up. I've felt so much better.
Mm,
Got rid of the afternoon lull, and the reason I knew to do that was because I had my blood work done.
mm,
And I think that that's important for guiding us in our nutrition because we can optimize our nutrition according to recommended daily intakes and eat enough carbohydrates, enough fat, enough protein, and still have deficiencies. Um, Another blood test I did a number of years ago was a micronutrient test, and this is a bit harder to get and a bit more expensive. But it showed me that I was depleted in chromium, which is a micronutrient that most of us don't even think about. But it's lost in your sweat. So I supplement chromium because I know I've got a bit of a tendency to be easily deficient in chromium. So then I supplement that. And so that's where we can start to have some targeted supplementation where our diet might not have the density of those things that we would require to have the optimal levels. Because I eat red meat, I eat good sources of iron, but just not quite enough for me when I'm training. And so I think that that's a really important part. And there's a really great app called Chronometer,
I use that too.
Chrono meter. Yeah, and it's one of the I think it's still the only one. There might be another one now. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I use it to track my micronutrient intake because it can break down foods and tell you, okay, this is the amount of B vitamins you're getting, all the different types of B vitamins you're getting. This is what the micronutrient levels are for zinc, selenium, even chromium that I just mentioned, iron, all the rest of it. You can get an idea if you just track that for a couple of weeks. If you eat fairly consistently, you track that for a couple of weeks. It can easily raise some red flags for you. You could look at your diet and say, "Oh, you know what? I'm not eating enough fiber. I need to eat more
Mm,
fiber." Oh, you know what? Like, I thought I was getting enough protein, but I actually probably should eat about 20% more protein. Where can I get that from? It might even point to something a bit more difficult, like selenium, for example, or boron, or some of these things you don't even think about needing that you can easily remedy just by eating a good source of selenium. Just some more nuts. Brazil nuts are the most notable example for
mhm.
selenium. Just eating those once a week could get you to be in range again in terms of taking that on. So I think some basic tracking would really serve people well. It's a bit of a pain, but just grab yourself a food scale off of your favorite online shopping platform. You can get it for not very much money. If you it probably like 10 euros or something, like it wouldn't be that expensive to get a quality food scale and use
Mm.
this free app. And that could really up your game. And you'll note that I start there rather than saying like you should do this diet or you should eat less meat or eat more carbohydrates or eat more fat because that is so personalized.
Mm,
And the biggest thing I would say to people is that you want to feel good. You should feel good. If you don't feel good, if you feel flat, something's missing.
mm.
You shouldn't, don't just blame it on aging. People like to do that. No, no, no. You should feel good. You should have good energy. You should feel like you're recovering. And if you're not, there's a gap that you need to plug in terms of your nutrition, most likely.
Yeah, I like that approach very much, even with the blood test. I mean, you mentioned it before. I was on one of my longer bike rides recently, and all of a sudden my left hand was getting numb. And I was like, what is this? Is this a nervous thing or what? And I went to the doctor, and the blood test showed I had uh, low vitamin B12 levels. And we supplemented it, or we didn't even supplement it. He gave me an injection, right? This is a little bit more than just a food supplementation that you might usually do. And it really went away. And that showed me, yeah, it's really important to get this checked every now and then, even for micronutrients and all those things, because you never know exactly what's going on if not a expert is looking at your data. And again, we are all individuals. We have a very individual metabolic system, and the better you know how it works, the better you know about the breakdown of what is happening in your body, the better you can go about it, and the healthier you can basically design your nutrition intake and your training and everything. Yeah.
That's a great example, John. I'm glad you mentioned that one because, again, it's personalized. Like, I don't have that problem. I have the different problem. I actually don't absorb B12 well genetically. And so I can end up with very high levels of B12 in my blood, but not actually in my cells. Right. So I would have a different presentation than you would. And in fact, it's not good for me to just put more B12 in. That's not the right thing. I have to think down the chain, like, okay, how do I get the B12 in my blood to go into the cell?
mm,
So, yeah, very interesting examples that we're coming up with here. And people in the audience would all have different things to learn about themselves. And again, like, take a lot of agency in that, meaning own that, be proactive in that, because you're the only one who can consciously perceive whether or not you're feeling as good as you should, or if something weird's happening in your biology, like your hand going numb, or me just feeling fatigued and flat, even though I'm
mm,
doing everything else right. You're the one who will know whether or not you need to get some more information, and you should trust that.
absolutely. And another thing is it can take a little bit of time, when I think of my knee problems or knee challenges, so to say, I went to many different experts, and in the end, it was a combination of different factors that caused my patella issues. And one big thing is definitely now in hindsight, collagen intake. I think ever since I supplemented, going back, by the way, to another episode here in the podcast where my co-host Jörg was interviewing a specialist who's active in that realm, and even came up with a formula of several supplements and products that really make a difference. And he was mentioning, and he's I think maybe Olympic swimmer or something like that. He trained hard, and he said collagen intake, type 1 and 3, I guess, is really important when you train for longer distance triathlons. And I totally believe that's true. Um, Maybe it's, again, very individual, but for me it works, and you gotta find out what works for you. And nobody can tell you for sure if you take this and that, it will always have this and that result. No, you have to experiment and find out about what is the right combination for you personally. Yeah, man, it's so interesting to talking with you about all those things that we really love. And maybe just to wrap it up, um, I know that you are very much involved in all those topics. And when I had a look at your Instagram linked list, or was it your profile, you were putting there the is it reverse TV series? It's not going backwards, is it? It is really about maybe reverse your aging or something. I believe, I guess.
I hosted a docu-series that we shot in
Yeah.
Costa Rica at the start of 2024 that you can now watch. We're still trying to get it onto Amazon Prime, so it's got a bit more exposure. But you can watch it. You can watch it on, I believe, Tubi, Tubi. There's another one, E360, that it's going to be on shortly. We haven't yet announced that, but that should be ready fairly soon. And then the other one is Glued, Glewed, Glued TV, which you can actually get on an Apple TV. Then you can watch it. It's called Reversed: The Race for Longevity. It's the season one premiere of the docuseries. We're hopefully going to do a season two. And yeah, on that, the objective I had was to take what's happening in the technology and science and make it accessible for the everyday person, and to also demonstrate what the knowledge we've gained around health span, what it can do in everyday people. So we had this lovely couple on there, Sharon and Kevin, who are in their 60s. Sharon worked at the post office her entire life. Kevin's a corn husking Iowan farmer that when you shake his hand, You can feel how feel how long he's been a farmer, like woo, strong guy. And we had some interventions with them with some of the best longevity supplements, clinics, biological age testing, and we're able to show how much we could improve their health, but also what we call their biological age, which is measuring biologically how old they are, not what's on their driver's license or passport or birth certificate, but what their biology is representing. And we were able to take them from Kevin from being biologically in his 70s to being biologically in his 50s with what we worked on him in terms of some interventions. And that's a really powerful narrative that shows what's possible
Hmm.
for people today. And those of us who are longevity athletes, triathletes here, we're already doing a lot of those things. And just with some further optimizations, we can stay youthful and healthy for much longer than we've previously thought was possible.
Sounds really interesting. I'm definitely gonna check that one out. So, what else can you share when people wanna find out more about Nick Engerer now? Of course, we will link to your Instagram, but do you have a website or anything else that you might wanna point us to?
Yes, so I run a company called A Longer Life, and you can find that at my website, which is my name, Nick Engerer, Engerer.org, O-R-G. And when you go there, I've broken down all this stuff we're talking about into a four-part framework, which starts with the longevity mindset. That's part one. Part two is developing your own longevity strategy so you can navigate all the many choices you have to make. Three is talking about all these longevity lifestyle factors that you should change first before you go spending any money on fancy things. And fourth is the fancy stuff. It's longevity technology. It's the things that people like to start with right away, but then they end up wasting a lot of their money. It's all the supplements, biological age test kits. Um, it's even things like this red light therapy, which I let you put on your knee for a
Mm-hmm.
while. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's all sorts of really cool stuff out there, but we don't want to start there. Where we want to start is by developing, adopting, and cultivating a longevity mindset. And this is why I've released a free longevity mindset course, which is available on my website now. If you just click on mindset, you can get there. And I've uploaded the first two chapters. The third chapter is just about maybe 2 weeks away, and there'll be a fourth chapter, and that's all going to be free, helping people understand how to adopt a longevity mindset, all the exciting things that are coming down the pipeline, and the key reasons why they don't have to believe that they're going to become weak and sick as they grow older. They can be like those longevity athletes that we see on the podium at our age group races. So don't forget to shake their hand and tell them I'll see you next year, because they've got a longevity mindset, and you can be sure you can see them again.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely link to that. And man, I'm so glad that you actually came to the show. And it's not like you mentioned it, that you kind of weaseled your way into this. No, I was pulling you into our show, and I'm very happy that I did, that you took the time to explain this in such a great detail and with so much expertise. I again learned so much again today about all this, and I'm pretty sure there would be enough interesting stuff to talk about in a second interview. Maybe we can make it a little longevity series here. I would love that. I'm definitely going to subscribe to your course and want to find out more about this. I think it's really important, and I'm so happy that we were able to get you here on the show and share this very important information with the audience. And I hope that we are going to maybe ride again on Saturday or swim on Sunday, and definitely have one or even more podium finishes together.
Sounds great, John. Real fun to be here and speak with you. And unfortunately, my German's not so great, so hopefully everybody can translate.
Oh, we
But
gonna
thank you,
we
John.
gonna we gonna work on that too. Maybe we do like a little language tandem or so while we are on the bike. Let's see. Yeah. Thanks again so much, mate. Chat soon, and continue doing what you do. It's really great stuff, and see you soon.
Thanks, John.